I'm going to welcome my good friend and my 100th guest from live from my drum room, Dave Weckl.
Johnny,
Dave.
hey man,
Oh man, it's
what
great to see you. Welcome
what's
home.
happening? Thank you.
Yeah, yeah. For everybody watching, Dave was kind enough to do this at the tail end of a tour where you just got back last night. I'm sure you got very little sleep and you were up early this morning. So thank you for doing this today, first of all.
Oh man, it's my pleasure, man. I was, I had watched a bunch of your stuff. I was like, man, I wonder if Johnny's going to ever ask me to do this.
I can't
he
believe
doesn't,
you
he
said
doesn't,
that.
doesn't, doesn't like me anymore. What's happening?
I love you. You
But
know that.
no, I'm so happy I'm honored to be part of your thing that's taken off, and you have such great guests and great content. So I'm honored to be number 100. So thank you for the invite. Happy to be here.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for doing this. I know timing probably for you could have, there was a lot you had to sort of work around. So I really appreciate that.
Those of us that do this, we're kind of used to, you know, flying around and this, then that, then this, then that. It's like we wouldn't know what to do with ourselves any other way. So it's all good.
Hey, speaking of flying around, so you're man, I see what you're doing and you're back at it. It's like you're back on the road and you just finished this hit up in Northern California, right, with the Dave Weckl Tom Kennedy project.
Yeah. The project with Tom Kennedy, my brother from another mother from St. Louis here. Tom lives in New York now, but we've been playing together, man, since 1975. When we
Wow.
met, and it's such a beautiful chemistry that we have, and I'm so happy that we're still around and able to do it together. And finally, after all these years, we put a project together, and it's all Tom's music from his stories CD. And this last tour, we invited Eric Marienthal, great, obviously needs no introduction, um,
Sure. Yeah.
to join us, with Stu Mindeman killing it on keyboards. So yeah, we've been having a ball. We did 7 gigs in a row on the West Coast, and I know a lot of people are going to probably ask, "Hey, what about the East Coast? What about here? What about there?" And it's all in the works to definitely spread the love with this band, because it's really special and just a lot of fun. The music's great. Tom's not only an incredible, bass player, but his composing abilities I never knew, actually, and he just got
No kidding.
so into it on the pandemic. He just all he did was write, and he just came up with
Yeah.
2 records, full of music. So yeah, we've been hitting it. So yeah, we had a great run on the West Coast. It was fun. Sold out.
That's great.
Went into percentages everywhere. So it was really good.
Man, that says it all right there. Yeah, that it's, you know, people have been just dying to have you back out there and it's so exciting to see that. I'm so glad to see, you're back out there and, Steve Smith and all my friends that have been waiting for all these, for the time to be right again to do it and get back out there and play music.
Yeah, it's certainly great to get out there and do it again, and to just see the people come out and hang. And I mean, obviously we still have to deal with this pandemic, but I think we're all figuring out how to responsibly deal with it, I hope. And hopefully we can
Yeah.
keep it going, and to learn how to live with it, and be able to play and have people come out.
So if I can ask Dave, logistically, I was thinking about this earlier too, where you had all these hits. Did you take, this is a kind of a gear question, but did you take a personal drum kit with you, or did like Yamaha provide a kit and then you guys traveling in a van and you had the same kit all the time, or?
Back in the day, we used to actually show up at the airport with a full drum set and like all the gear, and slip the bell guy, the sky cap at 20, and he just put the
Yeah,
stuff on and no questions
yeah,
asked. Those days are long gone, man. No, so I think we all rely on support from our companies, and Yamaha helps me out, so much. Uh, as does Sabian when they can, to get me cymbals in different places. So, but 9 times out of 10, I carry my own cymbals if I have to.
right.
But yeah, the drums, usually through SIR or the like. I've actually had just yesterday at Yoshi's. up in Oakland, my good friend Darren came from Dubs, music in Dublin, and
Yeah.
brought a
Yep.
kit for me, and so that was great. So we do get the help, and it's necessary. Of course, when I play in LA, I still have a drum set stored there, so I get to use my own stuff. But generally speaking, we were not in a van this time because the dates were too spread out. We started in Seattle, then we came to LA, then we did drive up to Ventura to play at the Grape, which is a cool little room up there in Ventura, California, and then but then we had to drive back to Burbank and fly up to San
Oh,
Francisco to do the Yoshi's gig. So yeah, little bit of the throwing the darts and wherever they land, type of
I
thing. But at
dig. Yeah.
least we got to play. At least we got to play most of the places we usually play on the West Coast, so that was fun.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I wondered that if that makes perfect sense. Yeah, that you can rely on backline companies and people like SIR and of course your companies to have the gear there for you. And
Yeah.
I
Well, what I
and
do,
yeah.
I take a suitcase. I don't even carry a gear case anymore because that has to go on the bulky baggage thing, and 9 times out of 10 it gets hung up in either coming or sometimes it doesn't get on the plane. So I stopped doing that and just put it in a hard shell suitcase, so it looks like normal luggage. But in there, I put all of my microphone clips and sticks and cowbells and accessories, stuff that I need. So that's a cool little tip that actually works better than showing up with a case that looks like a gear case. They don't like that. They say, oh yeah, that has to go over there somewhere, and you got to take it somewhere
Right
else.
on.
And like I said, so that works. The symbols kind of mess it up, but 9 times out of 10 they come out of the normal luggage anyway. So it's all good. That's how I kind of have learned to manipulate the system a little bit so that my bag generally shows up. And
Yeah.
I bring
Yeah.
what I absolutely need. But like I said, I'm either using my own stuff that's stored in places, but I don't have too many of it, too many places that I have that. So I do rely on Yamaha's help, and they're always super helpful for me.
Great guys. Yeah. Great
Yeah.
support always. And yeah, I think that's a great tip because I think that's important for people to understand that too, that nowadays it's like you said at the very beginning, the days of being able to the crisp handshake, the $20 to get your stuff. Yeah, it's
Oh
just not
God.
happening anymore. No.
Oh God. Yeah.
I remember us traveling together years ago and it was, it was a different world. Yeah. I'll just leave it at that. Yeah. Oh, good
Every
on you
way.
though that you can, yeah, you
Absolutely.
can, you can make it happen. Um, and so now you're literally getting ready for your big band hit that's this weekend.
Right. Well, yeah. For those that don't know, I mean, I left LA about a year and a half ago, a little more now, and yeah, I just wanted to upgrade, my studio space, because so much of what I'm doing, from here on out is in the studio. Filming for my online school, filming for everybody that wants a recording for a track these days wants video. So yeah, I was all my life I had been, kind of confined to a two-car garage space, and it was just too small. In LA, man, it was just nuts. I couldn't really afford to upgrade. So my options were, to look elsewhere. And I had my little place in Italy, of course, with my wife Clivia Tanisi there. Um, but for the home zone, because my daughter still lives here and she's in LA and she has family here in St. Louis too. So I figured out St. Louis is makes the most sense because I still have family here. My cousins live here, and from my dad's side, and I have a lot of my good friends that I grew up with: Jay Oliver, Bill Lenahan. They're all they either come back or in and out. So we've been doing stuff together, and my record company is here, Autumn Hill Records, with Rob and Mike Silverman. So it made a lot of sense to come back. So I found a big house here that I can put the studio in the lower level and get it going.
Yeah.
And yeah, now that I've been here a while, it's getting reacquainted with the area and the musicians and the players around. I've located and found some incredible players here. So I'm like, well, when I'm home off the road, I want to do something. So LA was just always too nuts. I could never really find the time or the way, or it was just so spread out, so many people but here it's a, you know, confined area. So um, so I enlisted the help of a good friend, drummer of a friend of mine, Kevin Janino, who I've known since we were kids in high school here, and he is the guy here in St. Louis. He does all the shows, all the big bands. He's a really great player, and along with Dave Dickey, who has his own big band here, I said, "Hey guys, can you help me put something together?" And I was like, "Dave, I don't want to compete with your band." He was like, "No, no, no, it's all good. I just want to be in it. Let me play lead trombone and help you." You know, so between those two guys, they've kind of contracted all the musicians here. And for me, it's always, you know, this has been a dream for a long time. It's been on the plate for 20, 30 years, really, that I've wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and I've always had the idea to include the kids, you know, to try to get the really good kid players in the band. So we have 4 all-state kids. You know, we've got 2 trombone players, incredible trombone players, and you know, Max in the trumpet section, and we got a guy in the sax section too. So we've got 4 all-state high school kids that are just killing it, and you know, they're all
Yeah.
doing sectionals and getting ready for the first show. That's right. The first show is Sunday at Pattonville High School auditorium at 3 p.m. And tickets are on sale for that event at eventbrite.com. So anybody that's local or is thinking about coming in, that's where you can get the tickets. And yeah, we're going to film, we're going to record, we're going to do the whole thing just right out of the chute. You know, try to get it documented, try to get a product out of it, and see what happens. But man, the first rehearsal, we have a little clip online on YouTube, and the first big band rehearsal, and man, right out of the chute, running right through the tunes, everybody was killing. You know, it was really fun. So yeah, we're playing a bunch of buddy charts. Of course, we're doing some Woody Herman, La Fiesta, and a Bill Watrous chart, Spain. Um, you know, to try to give a little nod to Chick, and you know, and then
Yeah.
I got a couple
Yeah.
of my tunes arranged too. Tower of Inspiration, Tower 99. We have arranged, and we did one of Tom's tunes that we play, Spiritu del Songo, which is a really up Latin tune. So we got that arranged for the big band, so that'll be in the set as well. So yeah, I'm really excited about it, and yeah, looking forward to it.
That's exciting. Well, I mean, is that something you and I mean, taking a big band on the road, I know is more than ambitious, but is that something you think maybe you could do in other cities with some other local players? Kind of do a similar type thing where you bring your charts and you could get some. I mean, I just think that's so exciting, and I think it's got to be so exciting for these kids to have that experience.
Yeah, I haven't thought that far ahead, to be honest. I'm more concerned with getting this local band really tight and playing and do the gigs with this band, with the personnel in this band around the area. We kind of got to see what happens, if there's any
Yeah.
interest in momentum. I mean, this is not a 4 or 5 piece group, right? It's a big band, so we've got some sponsorship. You know, we've got help, because it's not cheap to put this show on and to pay all the guys what
Yeah.
they deserve, and you know, so touring it,
Yeah.
we'll have to see. But yeah, we'll see where it goes. For right now, this, I'm kind of a day at a time guy, so this is, you know, the first thing that we're worried about.
Yeah. No, I dig. I dig. I know. I mean, it's yeah, it's a whole other thing, like you say, to with a band that size to take it on the road. But well, I'm looking forward to seeing, you know, the videos and hearing the recordings. It's
Yeah,
exciting.
we'll definitely get a product out of it. So we'll have some stuff up there eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. I you know, and I know that's totally in your wheelhouse. You know, that's it's so cool to see that, you know, all the things you've done for as long as I've known you, as long as everybody's known you for 40 years, basically, that you're able now to, you know, play this music that was so important to you as a, you know, as a young drummer. You know what I mean? You've sort of come back to your roots more or less, and you know, playing buddy charts, and that's got to be so rewarding, you know.
Yeah, it's I grew up with the big bands. You know, my father thankfully had the insight to buy a Buddy Rich record after my initial introduction to jazz with Pete Fountain and Jack Sperling on drums, on those records that he had, because he was a amateur piano player and he loved Dixieland ragtime stuff. You know, so he had those Pete Fountain records, and He
Yeah.
didn't know who the drummer was. I didn't either at the time, but reading it, Jack Sperling. Okay, don't know who Jack Sperling is, but I actually got to meet Jack later, which was really just wonderful. Um, but um, but yeah, he brought home that Buddy record, and it was kind of like, holy cow! So that was, that started a quest that led me into more big bands with Louis and, with Basie and all of the, all the big band stuff. And there's a, La Fiesta I mentioned with Woody, and I went to dig up all these records again because I remember playing them, and I was like, man, La Fiesta, Ed Soph is killing it on
It's
that
yeah.
record. Holy
Yeah.
cow, it's ridiculous, yeah. And so, I remembered it, and because it was one of the things that actually helped me make my decision to go to University of Bridgeport, because Ed Soph was teaching there at the time. I said, man, I'll study with this guy. He's playing his butt off. So that was fun. It's in digging into all of these things. But yeah, Buddy was a main thing. I gotta show you something since I'm local here with my phone. My daughter figured out how to get this for me for Christmas, um, and it's really cool. Check out this little Buddy kit here.
Oh, check that out.
Yeah,
Oh, that's so cool.
yeah, that was an Etsy thing that she found, and actually the folks at Etsy kind of figured out who she was from the last name, and they actually made the kit. It isn't actually for sale like that, normally, but they were so cool. And they made me a little Yamaha bass drum too, and it is an ornament, with my name on it. So that was special. It was kind of neat.
Oh,
But
that's
yeah,
so cool.
Buddy. I mean, Buddy still to this day, man. It's like, okay, the drum solos, the speed, the unhuman characteristics of his abilities, but man, the thing Buddy had was the feel and the swing and the
Yeah.
supporting of the band, and just the orchestrations of the parts, and that's the thing with him. It's everybody thinks, oh, you got to play hard and all this energy and blah 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 blah, and it's like, man, you play like that with a big band, you're going to be kicked out in 2 seconds. So Buddy didn't play hard all the time. It's all about the touch, and he's playing 24-inch bass drum, wide open with the felt strips and stuff. So I'm kind of going back to those roots too, and um, playing a little bit of that setup with, of course, a few of my own additions, but I am
Yeah.
using a 24, and
You are.
with,
Okay.
oh
All
yeah,
right.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
And like a
So
buddy
it's
set up with the one rack tom and the two floors, or are you
well, I'll tell you.
more of
Let's
your
let's do this. We're going to talk about my studio that I'm building here, right?
yeah. Yeah,
We were going to
absolutely.
talk about
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So I'm just about, my buddy Jamie Bronner has been doing the floors all week, and the walls are all finished. And I was actually down there staining all the walls myself, the last month. But I just moved in my first kit, and that was this morning with the big band kit, that I'm going to be setting up. So come on, I'll
All
take you on
right.
a little, take you on a little trip, little tour downstairs. The rest of the house is a mess, but this is my lower level of the house, and as we walk into the studio, here's what we see. So
Look at that
that's
room.
it.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So that's the setup basically. So yes, two floors. Right now it's a 13 rack and a 14 floor tom and a 16, but I may switch the 16 into 14, which I usually do. There's a 16 on the left as well. But it's kind of mirroring, a buddy-ish setup that I used to play when I was a kid. So,
Yep.
um, and it's always the setup that I use when I do a big band. Um, so yeah, it's. But anyway, oh, I forgot to mention, just in the studio thing while I'm here, because Mitch will kill me if I don't talk about this. But but yeah, so like I said, I did all the staining and stuff, and the floors, but I got audio mute stuff on the ceiling, which really,
Beautiful.
really helps to control all of the reflections. And this is just a tracking room. The control room's over here, basically, still under construction, but it is all getting there, which I'm very, very happy about. And so,
Incredible,
but yeah,
Dave. I
yeah,
yeah, not surprisingly. I can only imagine what you're going to produce in the studio too. I mean, sonically and
yeah. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, we're gonna mix Tom Kennedy's new record in here. I've got some other things to mix and record, and there's another group that I started too called the St. Louis Groove Contingent, with which is a 5-piece kind of funky, groove band with vocals and
Hmm.
stuff. Incredible players here: Rocky Mantilla, vocals and keyboards; Teddy McCready on guitar and vocals; Jim Stevens on sax; and John King on bass. Holy cow! I didn't know who this guy was when I was here, but apparently he's been here forever. And oh man, he's something else. This guy. Wait till you hear this guy.
That's
Just
awesome,
the
man.
the groove stuff, it's kind of like a Chuck Rainey vibe. Oh man,
Yeah.
killing. Yeah.
But these
So
guys must be so psyched that you're in town too, that you're, I have to think you've kind of, St. Louis has always had a happening music scene, I know, but I have to think you coming back into town is sort of, reinvigorated a lot of these guys too, that having a name player like yourself, I mean, truly, and starting these projects and all the enthusiasm that comes with it.
yeah, I think so. It's cool for all of us. I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
like I said, I mean, I I'm still spending a lot of time on the road touring, and maybe not as much as I used to by choice, but picking and choosing a little bit more these days. But like I said, I'm spending time in Italy with my wife there with Clivia, so
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's definitely kind of my other place that I live. But here will be where most of the main projects happen. And like I said, when I'm home, I wanted to be able to have some fun playing live as well. So between the big band, which is the St. Louis Big Band Contingent, and the small group, which is the St. Louis Groove Contingent, I have something to do. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun. Yeah, we've been doing some hits too with Jay Oliver and Bill Lenahan and Tom Kennedy. We fly him in. So yeah, it's been invigorating, I think, for me as well as these guys. So it's everybody's it's nice. I'm trying to I want to. There's a lot of talent here in this town. There always has been, and a lot of great players have come out of here, man. I mean, Miles Davis was from here, Clark
Yeah.
Terry, Pat Metheny was nearby. There's David Sanborn. A lot of great players have kind of you know grown up in these in the Midwest. I mean, back then there was nothing else to do. It's like you have to either play sports or practice your instrument. Otherwise, it was
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
what do you do? Yeah.
So I want to just jump back to Buddy for 1 second, and I think what you said was so great, Dave, too, because you speak to it way better than I do from an expert standpoint. But I've always felt like when people talk about Buddy, they immediately fixate on like his speed and his technique, which was unmatched, no doubt. But I think you made a great point about his feel and the way he could swing a big band. And I think sometimes, I guess it stands to reason that when you had the kind of technique that Buddy had and the kind of speed, people lose sight of that. You know what I mean? The fact that he could just play time behind the band and make the rest of the guys just sound so great and kick it where he has to kick it and then just play dynamically and bring it down. And, I like yourself, I got to see him a number of times, and to me that was equally as great as the drum solo part of the show when you'd see all that stuff, just hearing him play with the band and just have it groove the way he did.
Yeah, the musical support for me is the biggest attribute that I think he had, that I think is so overlooked, because just like I said, 24-inch bass drum, you know single ply heads, sometimes even diplomat heads at times, but regardless, 24 by 14. I don't have a 14, fortunately, mine is 16 but inches deep. but but yeah, the drums were big, they were wide open, they were tuned high, they project, and it was just all about the touch. It was all
Yeah.
about
Yep.
how hard you hit a chord, which cymbal do you choose to support, you know, the horn hits, which how hard do you hit the bass drum, how hard do you know is it a rim shot or not, what is the voice that's happening that actually makes it sound like it sounds. And my favorite recordings and sound was the old days back in the 60s when it was just one mic and maybe a kick
Yeah.
mic, but there was not individual miking. So I'm kind of going for that with this band, with this recording, because we're going to have individual mics, but I'm also going to do the exact same thing. It's along with the two overheads in case I want to go stereo. I'm going to have that one center overhead and just a kick mic too. And I'm really going to be going for that because we'll have area mics set up, and although the horns will all be mic'd individually, the less amount of that I have to use, the better. I really want to go for the old school sound with this, so that it
Yeah.
sounds like a live band,
Yeah. Yep.
and
Wide
not a
open.
studio record. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely, man.
But
That's
yeah,
that's
that musical support and the textures, and just mixing yourself playing with the band, um, and the way that he would set things up, to be recognizable. I mean, sure, things sped up sometimes, or on edge. Sometimes they slowed down, but it was all part of the vibe, of the feel
yeah.
of the music. And I think, going back now and rediscovering over the last 10, 15, 20 years, when I started to do some Buddy tributes and things, I went back to listen to a lot of the old recordings. And there was a couple times where I was like, wow, the tempo really slows down here. Grooving Hard is especially good example. And it's
Mm.
an edit. There's so many edits in those, from one night to another, or a different take. And it's like I can think of 3 songs right off the top of my head that now I'm actually hearing the edits, of
Oh
going from
wow.
one night to another. But Grooving Hard, when they go to the sax solo, it just goes like this, and I'm talking about the original '60s recording. It's a different take.
Wow.
Mercy
I
Mercy, the same thing. After the drum fill at the very top, it's a different take. It's like there's edits all over the place. When they were putting these things together, that sometimes had something to do with tempo changes or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah. Do you think
yeah,
that was the record company that was doing it? Probably wasn't Buddy that was. I wouldn't imagine he'd want to do that. It was
yeah.
probably just the packaging of the record, maybe, or
I don't have intel on who was producing or making those
yeah.
decisions, but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if
Wow.
Buddy ever. I don't know if Buddy ever got involved in the mixes and sat there and listened. No, put this take with that take. Who knows? I have no
Yeah.
idea. Maybe Kathy Rich would know, but
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
but I've never known, if or how. I've always wanted to know how those things were recorded. Like, what mics did you use? Where were they placed? It's like, I'm
Yeah.
dying to know.
Yeah.
But but if you look at a lot of the, anything that's out there, anything from that period, there was generally one mic over the drums, sometimes two, but from the records, there's no pictures or footage that I'm aware of when they were recording at the Shea in Los Angeles, and all those records in the '60s. I haven't seen any pictures of that, so I'm dying to know. But we try.
Yeah. Last question about Buddy, and you mentioned hearing Buddy and your dad bringing home that record and it, changing your life. You prior to that, you were probably in your teens at that point. You'd been playing for a while because you'd already been playing. Like I know you were into some of the rock bands of the time, and was that was like a shift to jazz at that point, or had you been into jazz even at a young age?
Well, when I first started playing, like when I was 7 or 8 years old, I mean, of course, I was set up in my dad's work bedroom, which was a TV repair. He did that on the side, and and I had a little 3-piece kit in there, and I would play to rock records. That's
Yeah.
where I
Yeah.
was, had my fun. And he moved me out into the living room, and so I could play with him a little bit, and we would, and that's when the Pete Fountain stuff started to happen. That I would just start to learn, because I got interested in a little more challenging stuff. I could do the rock stuff pretty easily, and it was
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
I loved the music and had fun doing it, but I was drawn to the jazz stuff. So,
Mm-hmm.
but I was more like 12 or 13 when he brought that record home. So
Yeah.
because by the time I was 14 or 15, we were playing West Side Story, and we were playing things in the high school big band, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I was into it well before my teens. Yeah.
Well, that explains a lot because by your early 20s, you were, fully formed, I mean, you had all came out all guns, both guns blazing or all guns blazing. I don't know.
Well, yeah, thanks, but I call it, I was fairly well formed for that period in my life. To me, I'm still being formed. It's like I'm still
Yeah.
learning. I'm still practicing. I'm still just, I'm still attempting to do it the same way that I did it when I was a kid, which was like every time I sit down, I'm trying to make it as good as I can make it. So, and that keeps the motivation going, and it keeps me honest too. Definitely
Yeah.
want to be
Well,
happy with what I do, but very rarely am I 100%. So
yeah. Yep. No, you're a true professional, and when all of us in the world discovered you or when you burst on the scene in the mid 80s with Chick, I mean, I think that's you had been around, I know, before that, but I think most people really, you became this incredible success, obviously, Chick's first record, the record that you played on, 85. And
correct.
yeah, and can you maybe just take a second and talk about, you had a style then that that was your style, that was your signature sound, and your you know when you started studying with Freddie, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself in my brain here. When you started studying with Freddie, maybe about 5 or 6 years after that, you started to maybe make some changes. No, actually, it was later than that, wasn't it? It was maybe close to 10 years later, I think.
Hmm.
Mid
Right.
90s, yeah. What
Yeah.
were some of the things that Freddie sort of had you shift or change?
Well, let me address the first question first,
Okay.
because in my late teens, early 20s, especially when I got to college at University of Bridgeport, Connecticut. I mean, I was spending a lot of time practicing, and my roommate and friend and guy that I kind of kicked out of the chair when I got to Bridgeport, Joel Rosenblatt. We spent a lot of time, dueling and hanging and practicing. So I spent a lot of time, and when I was 16, 17, that is when things started to transition a little bit out of the big bands, that I started to get into the fusion thing, because the big bands sort of led to Peter, Peter Erskine was doing a lot of stuff. He was with Stan Kenton, then he was with Maynard, and he started to play on all of these great records. Uh, I'm not sure how I got. Maybe it was just because I started to buy drummers records, but Billy Cobham,
Hmm.
I bought, Crosswinds and his other record with figure eights on it, and like, oh, not figure eights. What's the name of the tune? I don't know. Did those first two records from Billy back in the day was the first time I heard Michael Brecker play too. He was on those records, especially on Crosswinds, "The Pleasant Pheasant." I remember that song, and so I was getting into the fusion thing. So then from Michael's thing on there, I got into the Brecker brothers, and I started to, with Randy and Michael, and then it was also a quest. When I was 16, I remember this vividly. Tom Kennedy's brother Ray, late great Ray Kennedy. We were, I think, actually going to see Peter with Maynard here in St. Louis,
Wow.
and he pulls me into the car. He says, "Come here, I want you to hear something." And what he played, I had never heard any drumming, both contextually and sonically. I'd never heard anything like that ever. And I was like, "What is this?" And he said, "Well, that's Chick Corea with Steve Gadd." And I think it was Humpty Dumpty was the tune. Um, and I always get this confused. I don't remember if that was on the Leprechaun record or Mad Hatter. I can't remember. I think it was. Yeah, I'm not going to say, but it's on one of those records. And that was the first time I had heard such precise drumming. The sound was in your face. I was just like, "What is that?" So then the quest to find everything that Gad played on, got started from there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that sort of led me into understanding that there was roles to play at the drum set depending on the music, and not only did you have to play a certain way, you needed to sound a certain way, sonically. The drums, taking I mean, not that one drum set can't work for a lot of different styles, because it can. Um, Most of it depends on contextually what you're playing, but a lot of it does have to do with the sound. You take a fusion drum set with a 22 and a hole in the front head, drums tuned relatively low and muffled or whatever, or that tight sound, that kind of gaddish sound,
Yeah. Yeah.
which later became my sound, because the sound was always important to me, so I took it in there. You can't take that kit and put it into a bebop situation with a piano trio and expect to do it, authentically, or even to some degree, if you don't have an established name already. They're going to look at you like, dude, you got to get another drum set, because
Yeah.
this is not working. Um, and that's why I'm saying it's like when I talk about Buddy and I talk about all of the support and the texture, and a lot of it had to do with that drum set, his cymbals, the snare drum, the way it was tuned, and especially his touch. So, and that has to do with all styles. You can't go play a fusion gig and touch the tom toms like a bebop gig. It doesn't work. I learned after getting into Steve in that period that you gotta intend, and you gotta hit the toms. You gotta make that something happen with those, or you can't just suggest the sound around the tom toms. That was kind of a big deal. And like I said, when I talk about role playing, I talk about that a lot in my school with students. That every time I get a song to play, it's like, okay, what acting part do I have to satisfy here? It's like, who do I have to become, in a sense, to make this music sound musically like I would want it to sound if I was just listening to it, not putting me in the chair. Me comes after satisfying the musical aspect of what needs to be there to make the music work, in my opinion. Then the special stuff that I would want to add to it, then I see how that works, and a lot of that has to do with the composer and the rules of the song, the rules of the group. How busy do you want to get? Is it groove oriented? And how much is too much? How much of the less is more approach is too little. So, but it became very apparent, with Gad, that it was like, okay, I have to understand what that is. I've got to tune the drums differently. So I started experimenting with smaller drums, thicker heads, tuning low. And that's kind of how the whole sound thing came to be. And then I was always into the sonic aspect. So not only did the drum tuning become part of it, but I also started miking and carrying around a small system to these clubs. Everybody thought I
Yeah.
was nuts, looked at me like, what are you doing? But I'll tell you what, the first time I got to play with Anthony Jackson, and I had my 18-inch cabinet sitting there, and the drums with he was freaking out. He was just pulling out. He was like, "Oh my God, I've never heard anything like that," because it sounded like a mixed studio drum
Yeah.
set on stage, and it really worked. So I kind of do that. To this day, maybe not quite as much, because the drums are a little bit more open than they were back then. So, but I still do it, with my QSC mixer that I have, my
Yep.
Touch Mix 16. I do all the drums go in there as for the fusion stuff, like for this Tom Kennedy shows that we just did, and most of my stuff that I've done over the last 25 years, I've done all the miking myself, the mixing myself of the drum set. So. And it's a big part of it. That's the
Yeah.
presentation. It's how you sound. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, Dave. And I was remiss in not saying, I think you, in my mind, you were the innovator in terms of, like, whether it was a clinic or a master class. You were maybe other drummers now do that, but you were the first to be you'd have a self-contained mix. As you say, you'd get your own mix on stage, and send it to the front of house guy, right? I mean, that was basically, and I think you still do it that way with your clinics, right? You basically provide a mixed sound.
I do it that way with 90% of the shows that I do as well,
Yeah.
not only
Yeah.
clinics. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not I'm not one to think that I can do it with no help. You know,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have I have a sound guy out front that we work to get the balances. But if you think about it, once you get it straight, because all of the integral microphones of a drum set, you could look at that like strings on a guitar. It's like
Hmm. Hmm.
if you're hitting the drums evenly, like you're playing strings on a guitar evenly, if you're doing that and you're in control of those dynamics of each individual voice or each string, each drum, whatever it is, to have somebody have the control to change that doesn't make sense to me. It's like a sound guy having the ability to take one string and turn it up or turn it down or gate it and do something else with it. I'm
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, wait a minute. I want to control the dynamics, and I've worked my entire life to be able to hopefully play good enough to be able to do that. So let's get the sound together. I know that my setup will be 97%, if not more, there from the last night. I've got the presets. I know, what works with my kit, my mics, my heads, the mixer. The room is the only variable. So, I got to
Yeah.
do maybe make some adjustments for the sound system of the room, but I studied enough and have done enough on the other side of the console to know, what to do to get the sound that I'm after. With EQ, and I don't use any compression live at all. Actually, I don't even touch a compressor, but very limited gating on tom toms just to prevent ring through. But most of that still gets taken care of with tuning. I think a lot of drummers have the misnomer that it's like, oh well, I'm going to tune my drums, make them sound good right for me right here with no
Hmm.
mics, and then expect an engineer to put microphones on it, and say, okay, deal with it. But it's like, well, if the drum is ringing until next week, it's like there's not much an engineer can do about it, except gate
Right.
the hell out of it. And then, so you do have to take some responsibility. And I just took it to the next level with with miking it and mixing it myself. You can't really expect to be able to do that if you don't have the training of an engineer and know a little bit about that. And again, it's not something that I think that I can do on my own. I don't. But but for me, for most of the shows that I do, that's how I do it. Now for the big band show, I'm not doing that at all.
Mm.
I'm playing open, and I'm actually experimenting with some earplugs, because I hate putting in earplugs that drown out everything. So I don't want to do that. But I've gotten to the point, if I play without my in ears or without protection, I prefer to play without anything, but it's just dangerous. It hurts.
Yeah.
So you have to protect your hearing, and I'm trying to. I just got some new ones here that I'm not going to talk about yet, but if they work, I'll be promoting them. An
Great.
earplug that actually sounds good, that just cuts the volume. Um, so we'll see on that. But for the
Yeah.
big band, I'm not going to be doing that. I'm just going to have everything live and playing wide open without the mix. Somebody else will be taking care of that. But for this thing, it's pretty much just going to be an overhead and a kick mic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. But what you said before makes perfect sense, Dave. It does, and I know that I think it's if other drummers, had the ability to do that, I'm sure they would. To be able to engineer, basically mix their own sound. I certainly would. If I could send a great mix out to a front of house guy, at least knowing that it's my sound, uh, right? I mean, that's and to your point, and I know I'm kind of stating the obvious here, but you can't. There's some great front of house guys, or could be some guys watching right now that are great engineers, front of house engineers, but they don't know how you want your drums to sound. And I know you and I have talked about this. I've spoken to Simon about it many times that um, you're putting your sort of otherwise you're putting your sort of all your eggs in their basket that they're going to get your sound, and you can't depend on that. So
Well, look, there's some amazingly great sound engineers, and I've gotten to work with a lot of them. Dennis Moody's one of them. And,
Yeah.
when I work with Dennis, he says, I said, Dennis, you want the kick separate? You want the overhead separate? You want something? And he's like, no, man, your stuff sounds great. Just give it to me like that, and it's, but for me, even in a bigger place, I'm talking like, 10,000 plus, seating place, I will generally suggest to the front of house guy, look, take the overhead separate, take the kick drum separate, and
Hmm.
at least we'll split that so that you have control, because that can really change with people coming in, and the rest of it we'll try. But in cases like, with Chick, for example, when we played with Chick and Bernie Kirsch was doing the sound, another obviously great engineer that I trust, he would split everything and I would let him do it. It's like, okay, and he would still take my stereo mix, but then he would either add to it or figure out what he needed differently if it had to happen. But like I said, I've spent the time that most of the time my stereo mix will be the best sounding if the engineer doesn't really know me, know what
Hmm.
I want from the drum set. So it's, I have fun with it anyway. It's fun for me to do it. So that's my
Yeah.
formula, and that kind of
Yeah.
works.
And I'll just say this: do you find mentally that when you're on the show, when you're performing, knowing that you're getting your best sound out there, does that help you? I suppose you're at the point now where maybe you don't really even think about it, but um, I guess what I'm trying to say is I think many drummers watching this can relate to being on stage or just not digging the way your drums sound on stage, and it mentally, it affects you mentally the way you play. And I know it does to me. Like if I'm not getting a good sound, it's a bummer, right? You're just having to work harder, and it's just not. So I would think the opposite holds true for you, where you're getting it. You got a great sound in your ears. It's a great sound out front. It just you can relax and you can just play your best. I'm guessing.
Well, yeah, to address the in-ear thing, but the one thing I think drummers make a mistake of is, they'll if they're in a big show or whatever, they'll just get there and stick in the in-ears and make adjustments and just play right away with the mix from the in-ears. And I think that's a mistake. I fall off my own chair here. I'm the first thing I do when I get to the gig is I make sure, with nothing in my ears, I make sure that the drums, first of all, are tuned and responding well acoustically, that they sound the way that I want them to. The next thing that I do is I turn on my mixer, and I have monitors, my QSC monitors that I use, usually the KW122s, which are 12-inch, but they're big 12s and they sound great. I don't even use a sub anymore because I don't need it.
Hmm.
But those speakers, then I get my stage volume so that the drums are sonically in a more high fidelity place, so that the bass drum and the whole drum kit just has a little more body. It's not loud. It's just enough to have, the bass drum has some oomph to it, and the rest of the drum kit, it just kind of goes like this in the low end, low mid
Hmm.
spectrum. I can put a little effect on it if I want, and that's where I start. And then, then me and the bass player Tom, in this case, he gets his sound comfortable, and then we get a comfortable place on stage. Same thing. I don't let the guy turn on the front of house until we're comfortable on the stage with our sound. And then when the front of house comes on, if things change too much, then it becomes this quest to figure out why.
Yeah.
99% of the times, it's because there's too much subwoofers going on, and they're usually either crossed over too high, so it's boomy. When I don't like these array systems where they try to get everything in the lower end of the spectrum from the lower mid range all the way down to the bass. They try to get that out of the subs. That's where the boomy feedback always happens. And
Hmm.
it's just, most shows are ruined for me from too much subs. I don't know if I'll see it in my lifetime where, subwoofers become like the norm. It's just like, man, it's just too much low end. It's annoying. But
Yeah. Yeah.
But we had a couple of instances on this last tour where not only the drum sound, but other things feeding back. You know, the sax mic. It's like, okay, we finally figured out we can't use this big condenser on, or even if it was a cardioid mic, on the soprano, on the keys that Eric was using, because it was just picking up too much stuff and it was feeding back. So let's put an SM58 up there, problem solved.
Mm,
May not sonically be
interesting.
the most high fidelity microphone, but man, you're not going to beat that microphone for, you know, for directional and
Hmm.
non, you know, so off axis stuff doesn't get into the mic and it doesn't feed back. That handled a lot of the problem. But also, we had to work with Celsa, our sound guy, to say, hey, man, you cannot push sound too hard because it's uncomfortable. The subwoofer was right off stage, right? It was right behind us at Catalina's in LA. And when that got too heavy, so that it was kind of maybe nice and big and full for the house, it was just too much for us on stage. Everything
Hmm.
was feeding back. I had to start rolling low end off of my entire drum kit, and that's when I know things aren't right, because I know from my setup, when the room is tuned correctly and the system is great. Like we went to Yoshi's, for example, man, it was just such a pleasure. And you're right. When you're not distracted, when the whole band is not distracted with the sound, we're free to play. And
Mm,
that's the whole thing. So I
yeah.
get very involved in that aspect. I don't just leave it up to the sound guy. It's like sometimes if I have to, I'll go out in front and work with him to, you know, to figure out what's going on. But most of the time it's a group effort to make sure that sometimes the bass player has to roll a little low end off on stage. Sometimes I have to turn my monitors down. I have to make adjustments based on the system and the house. So yeah, there's nothing like being distracted from bad sound. And you know, this last show we did at Yoshi's, they put a new sound system in there. Holy cow, man! We were grooving,
Oh,
sold out
great.
show, and there were no distractions. You know, the sound was excellent, and we could
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
play freely. So yeah, it's a big deal. It need time to get it right.
Yeah. And I always respected that about the way you, the way you would do that, the way that it allowed you that, as you just said, the freedom and that ability to just not be distracted to, in 99% of the cases where you knew that it was, you were getting your sound and you could just play and
Yeah,
concentrate on the music. And
yeah,
yeah,
exactly,
yeah. Can I, so
exactly.
I want to, somebody Andy Weiss just said that was such a great show at Yoshi's. Uh, many people watching here, by the way. Many. Nick Rich, we were just talking about his grandfather, Buddy. Yeah, my son's watching. Eddie Taduri,
Nice,
yeah, a lot of great folks. I'll come back. Dave Maddox, all right. Um,
cool.
but when I remember seeing you in the 80s, um, before I'd actually met you, I want to say around 86 or 7 with Chick, and you were playing a Simmons kit or triggering. You weren't playing a Simmons kit, you were triggering. Was it an SDS 5 or 7 that you triggered?
5.
5. Okay, that's
That's
what I thought.
yeah, yeah.
But it was one of the earlier, from my recollection. I think I might have been working for Simmons at the time. Um, there were guys doing that, but not at the level that you. And I won't ask you to get into all the specifics of that now because you probably don't want to even get into it. But I just remember like hearing the way that you did that it blew my mind because it was at a NAMM show. You might remember this, like 86, in a big like a Marriott ballroom or someplace like that.
I I do remember that show actually. Yeah,
Yeah, it was killing. You were killing, of course. My first time seeing you play live, and your sound was what I took. Besides your playing, and all these things we're talking about now make sense because I remember thinking you had this unbelievable sound, and your triggered sound was incredible too.
yeah. Yeah, that was. I think by then I had it pretty dialed in with my 2 refrigerators full of stuff that
Yes,
that
yes,
you could get out of a small box now. Um,
they were.
but yeah, I had you know all the drums mic'd. I had noise gates. I had it was crazy how much gear we had and how much stuff we carried around. But yeah, I was triggering. I think I used Fishman transducers taped to the tape. They were taped to the rims of the drums for the Simmons SDS5 for sure as a little bit
Yeah,
of an additive. But back then, I think I was playing an 8-inch tom and a 10-inch tom 12, 13, 15. So, and with those would have either been pinstripe Remos or Emperors, and I think at that time they may have still been pinstripes, but suffice it to say, the drums were dead, and we were really going for that punchy sound,
I see.
and
Yeah.
the Simmons was just an additive that gave that pitch bend on the end of things. Most of the I didn't have them on all the time. I mean, it was
Yeah.
used for an effect. And later, I started triggering everything from I had two samplers. There's a tune. There's a tune on one of the Chick records called Jammin' Cricket. I forget which record it's on. Might be on the last record. Um, and I don't know why I was tooling through Chick stuff when we were doing the reunion, and I happened upon that tune, and I noticed some of the comments were like, "Man, John sounds great on that thumb part on that tune," and I was almost going to chime in and say, "That ain't John." I actually took my 4 string and I played in because I'm a Marcus Miller wannabe. I always have been.
Oh
So
man.
I played in. It was in the key of E, so it was cool. But so I played in all the stuff for the tune. We co-wrote the tune, and I put it all over I had a Roland pad, Octapad, I think it was called, and I had a trigger on the bass drum, so that was the low E. And I had all of my it was all a trigger, all
Oh
triggering.
wow.
While John was up front playing the melody on the 6 string, you know. And then when we went to the B section, then he went back to the 4 string. But that was when he
Yeah.
had the 6 string on a stand out in front playing the melodies. And
I remember that.
but
Yeah.
yeah, I got kind of nuts with it, and on my own records too. I would compose all these songs with synths and percussion and I think on Heads Up there's a crazy solo piece on there. But yeah, I started to miss just playing acoustic drums, man. So when the
Yeah.
electric band got back, I got out of it all. When I left the electric band in the early '90s, and that's when I went to Freddie. That's early 93, 94, somewhere in there.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Yeah.
and that's when I kind of ditched the 8-inch tom, because by that time I was playing 3 toms across the top, 8, 10, 12. And man, I was just reaching. I was starting to get neck problems, shoulder problems, and everything was just out of place. And I was playing a lot more match grip than two. Um, and yeah, just started to run into physical problems. I was playing harder than I wanted to, and was taping up hands and all kinds of crazy
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So, but when I found Freddie, what changed the most was the approach to how I was playing the drums. I mean, it's grips changed from front to middle, using more the back of the hand. Getting into understanding how the laws of physics played into to playing with rebound, and just letting the sticks do a lot of the work. And then the setup became very important, and that facilitated a lot of the change, because I wanted to I wanted to, Freddie's thing was be natural with your body movements. If it's, it shouldn't be anything that you have to reach for. And I paid the price
Yeah.
for that
Yeah.
stuff over my career, with injury and a lot of pain. But it all kind of subsided, and definitely worked for the better when I moved stuff around. That's when I went back to the toms, offset off the bass drum when I play two rock toms, and then like I said, I got rid of the 8, so it was a 10 and a 12, and went back to thinner heads, so the drums were more open. Um, you know, Everything just changed to give me a path of more of a path of least resistance at the kit. Um, Still practicing controlled stuff to play softer, but to have just a more of an open sound.
Mm-hmm.
Just like I said, gripping the sticks less tight, and utilizing more molar motion for accents and heavier stuff, really
Yeah.
allowed
Yeah.
me to lessen my body motion, which helped me heal and prevent more injury to everything that was going on 25 years ago or more.
Yeah.
So
I remember seeing you with Mike Stern not long after, or it was probably during the process, I should say, when you had started studying with Freddie, and you were telling me some of this stuff. And I think one of the points you made at that time was that just what you just said about you were able to get the same amount of power, maybe even more power, by without the actual, having to tape up your fingers and the calluses and the bleeding, but you were still able to get like the backbeat, with Mike Stern, you have to obviously, you had to play with some oomph. And I remember you saying, I can, thanks to Freddie, you were like, you changed your sitting position, and you were getting as much or more power than before when you were having to really hit hard. And I thought that was pretty eye opening.
Yeah, I think power is the wrong word. It's, I got more sound, which can translate to power if you need it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
between the drum tuning and the upsizing, and then yes, the touch of letting the sticks vibrate, that was a big difference. Just letting
Mm.
kind of naturally letting things happen, so that you're starting with a surface that vibrates instead of it being tight and choked.
Yeah.
So, um, when you play harder and you play with the grip, tighter, you can get a harder transient. So it's almost compresses the sound, so it pops more. But when you're letting go, the sound is going to be wider and deeper, if the sticks are vibrating. So that, I talk about all that stuff in my online school, man, where
I
we
was
get
just going to
into
ask you that.
the
Yeah.
whole thing with setup and the approach to playing, so that you can relax and just, it actually helped me organically get into the music a lot more too. That was another benefit of that whole approach change for me,
Yeah.
because I got out of the cerebral aspect of subdividing, and just letting natural motion and movement dictate time, tempo, and feel.
That's great. Can you take a minute and, as we will probably wrap it up in a few minutes, but maybe talk about your online school? I wanted to make sure we covered that a little bit.
Yeah.
And
Well, Steve Orkin and I, we run my online school, that can be accessed through my website, daveweckl.com. And there's probably close to 60 hours worth of material on the site now, and it's there's so much there, man. It's, ranging from play-alongs to talking about grooves, different styles, of course, technical stuff, hands and feet, a lot of exercises, interviews with guys, a lot of stuff from the road, a lot of special footage that you can only get on the school from concerts, and we have a private Facebook group that is very interactive. I'm always in there talking with people, and they're uploading videos, and I'm critiquing, and so that kind of makes it, more or less interactive and very special. That you can only be in that group if you're in the school, and it's only $30 a month, so you can,
that's great.
cancel anytime. But yeah, there's a lot of info there, and we keep doing our best to add to it, which I'll be definitely diving back into once this room is done downstairs. So, yeah.
That's wow.
But yeah, check it out. Check it out. I'm very, very happy with all of the content, and like I said, we keep working towards putting more up there. So yeah, DaveWeckl.com.
Great. Thanks, Dave. That's
Yeah,
great. And I want to commend you because, I want to make sure I say this the right way. You're so well known as the great drummer that you are, that I think people don't realize how great an educator you are, how dedicated to it. And as long as I've known you, you've been, a real educator, like someone who, goes out and does a clinic or a master class with the intention of, you know, imparting wisdom to students.
yeah.
So
Well,
this
thanks
is
for that,
great.
Johnny. I mean, I appreciate that comment. Although I being a performer still, when that's still my priority, with keeping my performance level of playing where I want it, and doing all the projects that I'm doing, that still takes the priority. So as far as being an educator, I'm not really a teacher per se. I'm almost more of a consultant, of
Hmm.
so and I share what I know that works for me, that I have been able to get from all of my great teachers since I was a kid. Starting with Bob Metheny and Joe Berger in this town, and John B. Martino as well. Starting back then when I was a kid, up through Gary Chester, through, and of course Freddie. I haven't had that many teachers. Ed Soph was gave me a few lessons when I was in Bridgeport, Connecticut. at school. But all of my teachers have given me something, and I learned from a lot of different people. I mean, that's the thing. Michelle Camillo probably taught me more about Latin music than any drummer or percussionist, because
Yeah,
because
yeah,
he was a percussionist himself, and he showed me a lot about the rhythms and the grooves and all the different styles from all the different islands. Um, and just listening to music in general. That's the one thing that is probably the best way to learn, is just to listen and absorb, go back through the history, get into different styles, different people. The more that you can absorb, the more that you take it in, becomes part of your makeup, and then that becomes somewhat a little ingredient of the final meal that you present for people.
absolutely. No,
Yeah, but thank you for the words.
you're very welcome, Dave, and I think you're being very humble because it's it's one thing to be a great drummer, but to be able to teach and communicate the way you do, I think that's really special, and you've always been able to do that. So I'm sure
Well,
this is
what I think people don't teach so much is that it forces self-analyzation. God, I remember when I did Contemporary Drummer Plus One, right? And I transcribed everything that I played, every solo, and that project back in 1987, I said, this is the first and the last time I will ever do that. And it was just like, I don't want to know that much about what I do, but I'll tell you, the solos, the school, when I would do a course, when I would go in to do, no matter what it was, brushes or anything about doubles and training the left foot, it's like, holy cow, I got to be able to do this and know what I'm talking about. So it kind of forced research. I have to go in and look at things and discover all the great brush players, and
yeah, man,
and actually
yeah,
give reference to them as well. So yeah, it's a lifelong quest, man. It just keeps going, and it's inspirational, to it's a great place to find self-inspiration. It's just to realize how much material's out there, to have an open mind to bring things in. And I mean, there's some, man, a lot of new cats out there today that are just playing great, that that are
sure.
doing that. They've taken stuff from the history, just like we for me, I've done in the past, and try to make it my own thing. So it's a fun quest.
Well, you're an
What else? What
inspiration
else
to.
are we gonna do? What else are we gonna do, Jim? What else are we gonna
I know, I know. I was just going to say, and I speak for everybody, the thousands of people watching, that you're an inspiration to the rest of us mortals out there. So
do? Oh, come
thank
on,
you.
come on, come on.
Thank you for
Yeah,
all the
man.
years. And I do want to mention to everybody watching, Dave is going to be at PASIC this year,
Yeah.
and I'm gonna see you there. Is your clinic on Saturday, Dave? Is it?
I don't know. I think it's on Thursday. I think it's on
Oh,
the 10th, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's the 10th.
perfect. Okay, because I'm
Um,
leaving middle of the afternoon Saturday, and I was great. I'll see you there. Great.
yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Thursday
I'm also doing a clinic in Portsmouth,
on the
which
7th.
at the drum center. Yeah.
Yep.
And I think we're gonna attempt to put together a private little hang next day. So keep your eye out for that too. We're working on that at the moment. So
Beautiful. Okay, I'm going to try to get there. I was just there Saturday, up at Drum Center at Portsmouth,
drum
to
set, yeah.
see Shane. It's a bit of a hike for me, but I said to Shane I'm going to try to come on the 7th, and if there's something maybe the next day, that might even be easier to do. I don't know. We'll see. But either way, I'll see you in Indy at PASIC.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and I'll
Hey,
kind of
well,
give you.
I want to thank everybody watching, and for the continued support and interest. Really, really special to me that I'm happy. I'm just happy when somebody else gets something positive from what I'm doing. So that is also very inspirational for me. So thank you all.
Wow.
Appreciate it very much.
That's great. And I want to thank everybody for watching today. And I'm sorry. I know there've been a lot of questions and comments, and it was just we had such a great thing flowing here, Dave. I didn't want to kind of interrupt it. So apologies, I didn't get to your questions, all you folks watching, but uh, really appreciate everybody tuning in. And Dave, thank you so much for being here today for my 100th episode. Thank you.
Johnny, absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite, and great to see you here, and I hope to see you next month.
Likewise, buddy. You will see me next month. I'll sign off the stream, say goodbye to everybody, and Dave, hang tight if you would, and I'll see you in the room in 1 second. All
All
right.
right. So long, everybody. Ciao.
Big hand for Dave Weckl, everybody, and thanks for
All
watching.
right,
Yeah.
man.